There's a $60 billion fossil fuel utility scam going on, and Donald Trump is right in the middle of it. Check this out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. So, in the first hour, I was talking about how, big greed and big money have been basically taking down America for years and years. We had the tobacco industry lying to us for decades about the toxicity of their product. Before that, it was the asbestos industry. You've got the fossil fuel industry lying to us about, their products and, carbon emission and all this sort of stuff, and basically lying to us about climate change, and all for money, all to make profit. And it turns out that it's even worse than that. I mean, it's they're not only willing to kill us and destroy the planet, but now apparently the entire big pieces of industries that are associated with the fossil fuel industry are themselves knee deep in bribery and scandal. On the line with us is the assistant professor at the Department of Political Science at the Bren School of Environmental Science and Management, Professor Leah Stokes. And this is the Environmental Studies Department at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and a surrogate for Climate Power 2020. LeahStokes.com or ClimatePower2020.org, the websites. Leah is, her Twitter handle is LeahStokes, Leah Stokes. Leah, welcome to the program. Professor Stokes, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
Can you hear me? I am not hearing her. I'm not hearing anything. Okay,
can you hear
Professor
me now?
Stokes, can you hear me now? Yes, I hear you now. Can you hear me? Oh. Yeah, okay.
I did hear the question.
Professor Stokes, tell us about, basically I just said welcome to the program. Tell us about this multi-billion, the $60 billion scandal that started out, it seemed like a local bribery scandal in Ohio, but now it seems to be blowing up. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so as I studied in my book, which is called Short Circuiting Policy, First Energy, the electric utility, has been up to all kinds of shady, dark money schemes over the last few years. And we recently found out when the FBI arrested Speaker Larry Householder a couple weeks ago that it turns out a lot of this was illegal bribes, that they were funneling money into a dark money group so that they could get a large coal bailout. And in my book, I try to estimate how big that bailout is, and it's on the order of billions of dollars. And what it does is it keeps open several dirty coal plants that, of course, make it more likely for people to die from COVID because they're breathing in dirty air. And, of course, it exacerbates climate change.
Leah, as a fellow author, my apologies. I didn't realize you had a book. Give me the title again so I can write it down and mention it.
It's called Short Circuiting Policy.
Okay, great. Thank you. And so what's the involvement of Donald Trump in this? What's the involvement of Donald Trump in this?
Well, unfortunately, First Energy, before they were going to the Ohio State House to try to get their coal bailout, they were going to the White House and to the Trump administration. In fact, Larry Householder was flown to the Trump inauguration on a corporate jet that First Energy owned, along with his son. And First Energy flew to Washington, D.C. numerous times, perhaps 30 or more times, according to the Energy and Policy Institute, to meet with senior officials such as Rick Perry, who was at the time Secretary of Energy. And of course, the Trump administration worked pretty hard to try to get the bailout through because the Trump administration took big campaign contributions from coal barons based in Ohio like Bob Murray. We also know that an official with the 2016 Trump election campaign was involved in calling people up in Ohio, calling up representatives and trying to pressure them to pass the coal bailout.
We're talking with Professor Leah Stokes, the author of Short Circuiting Policies, if I have that right, and LeahStokes.com, ClimatePower2020.org. Tell us, this is there's a core or key issue here that I don't think that we've articulated. Exactly what is, you talked about this bailout. What are the details of this? What, is this some failing coal power plant, or some, is this the failure to transition to other kinds of energy? Is it, what is actually going on here? What is the actual scandal?
Yeah, so for the last several years, the utility company First Energy has been going to the Ohio legislature and trying to get money to keep open several plants that are not economically viable. In Ohio, there's an electricity market, which means that utilities have to actually compete to produce power. And there are several plants, coal plants in the state, the OVEC plants and the Samus coal plants, that lose money pretty much every hour they operate. But unfortunately, First Energy and AEP, two utilities that own those plants, they put a lot of debt into those plants. And so they don't want to shut them down, even if they are costing Ohioans extra money to run and, of course, polluting the air with lots of particulate matter and other very dangerous air pollution. They would rather keep them open. So what they did is they basically bribed the Speaker of the House, Larry Householder. They literally gave probably $500,000 to Larry Householder for things like his legal problems, his reelection campaign, or his secondary home in Florida, so that he would make sure that First Energy and AEP would get a big bailout so that they could keep these dirty coal plants open.
That is remarkable. Where is this going? You've got and is this, by the way, is this a Republican scandal, a Larry Householder scandal, a Trump administration scandal, and how do you expect this to play out?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of politicians take money from utilities. So there are lots of ties into the Trump administration. We know, for example, that the bailout funds that the Congress passed through the CARES Act several months ago, an enormous amount of that funding has been going to prop up coal companies that are in terrible financial shape, as well as fossil fuel companies that are basically bankrupt. I'm talking about companies that are rated as junk, that the Trump administration is giving money to through the Federal Reserve and also directly through other policies. So the Trump administration is really favoring coal, oil, and natural gas companies. And this is just a really blatant example of the kind of corruption that is allowing these companies to get special favors under the current Trump administration. But it also, of course, has to do with Ohio. And unfortunately, even the former Democratic candidate for president, Tim Ryan, who took a pledge to not take money from fossil fuel companies, was recently uncovered by journalist Emily Aitken that he did take money from First Energy, and he hasn't even said he's going to return it. So we have a lot of politicians that are in bed with the fossil fuel industry. The Trump administration is at the very top of that list, but we really have to get electric utility money out of our politics across the board.
Yeah, Tim Ryan is a Democratic congressman from Ohio. I know him. Decent guy, but hey, this is a bizarre business. Do you think that's going to happen, Leah? We have just a few seconds here before we hit a break.
Yeah, I do think that there's a big campaign gaining steam across the country to get politicians to stop taking dirty fossil fuel and electric utility money. In Virginia, politicians stopped taking that money, and the next year they passed a clean energy law. So we can get politicians to get out of the pocket of big oil and big utilities and instead start working towards the clean energy future.